The Queen's Jewish Link presents the Jewish Living Podcast, the show that examines the many facets of Orthodox Jewish life. Here's your host, Izzo Zwirin.
It's been 3 years since the last parade honoring Israel was held in New York City. But finally, after all this time locked in our houses, having to avoid one another, and digging ourselves out of a global pandemic, we will finally be able to come together as a nation and pay tribute to Eretz Yisrael. And to get us ready for the festivities is this week's guest.
Hi, my name is Gideon Taylor, and I serve as the CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York.
Gideon will be discussing all things parade, from themes to participants to security and everything in between. Gideon, thank you so much for joining me this week. I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. I know it's a very busy time of the year for you, and we're going to get into exactly why in a few minutes. I just want to give you a chance to give me, first of all, how did you get to where you are right now in this position? A little bit of a background on you, and then I have questions about the JCRC.
So I'm a rare commodity. I'm a Jew from Ireland. I grew up in Dublin, and I lived there until college. I went to college there, and then I came to New York to work for the Joint Distribution Committee. That was my first step in the world of Jewish community, and I worked there for 10 years, and then I went to serve as the executive at the Claims Conference dealing with Holocaust restitution. At the time of the Swiss bank settlements and big expansion in the early 2000s. I was there for 10 years. Then I went into the private sector for a while, took a break from Jewish community life. And then in July, I had the opportunity to come back for just a wonderful, wonderful job at a wonderful organization, the Jewish Community Relations Council, JCRC of New York.
So I want to get a little bit of information on the JCRC because I feel like the JCRC does a ton of work that we don't know about. We know about the parade, which is what we're going to talk about, but the JCRC does a ton more things that affect everybody on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a yearly basis. Can you talk a little bit about that stuff that the JCRC does?
Sure. So there's a number of different areas where JCRC operates. Firstly, we're a group that brings together different parts of the Jewish community. So there's a place for dialogue between all different groups and segments within the Jewish community, firstly. Secondly, we're the face and the arm of the Jewish community that deals with and works with communities in New York, communities of faith, ethnic communities. We're partners with many, many different organizations outside of the Jewish community, and we represent the Jewish community at those tables. We're in coalitions with them to address big issues of the day, important issues relating to social justice in terms of food insecurity, issues like that. It's very important that there's a voice of the Jewish community. So that's a second piece. A third piece of what we do is our public policy and government relations. So we work with elected officials on issues relating to the Jewish community, what's important, so that they're to educate people about the community, public officials particularly. That's the third piece. Fourthly, Israel is at the center, a core part of what we do. So we work very closely with groups to educate groups about Israel. We bring many, many groups to Israel, both elected officials and other community leaders from other communities to educate them about Israel. And we use those trips to Israel to introduce them and connect them with the Jewish community. So the Israel Parade obviously is part of that. That's another part of our work in Israel and promotion of and defense of and support for Israel. And fifthly is security, which was not an area that was a major area for the JCRC a few years ago. Was important. But after, a few years ago, as the series of incidents took place and attacks against Jews, it became clear that we needed to have a very serious security arm for New York. So together with UJA Federation, we formed the Community Security Initiative, or CSI, which now has 10 people working for it, helping synagogues, Jewish institutions, schools harden their premises, protect their premises. CSI does training of people in institutions, active shooter training, what to do if something happens. We help institutions apply for grants, for nonprofit security grants to help strengthen the infrastructure. So when you look at all of those 5 different pieces, We touch a huge range of areas and issues that affect this great, wonderful Jewish community of New York.
Phenomenal. And if people remember back to January of 2020, after some of the more horrific incidents that took place in the greater New York metropolitan area, there was a big march across the Brooklyn Bridge, and I believe the JCRC was the one that organized that whole event. Actually, our podcast got an interview with Pastor Gil Monrose following that, which I'm sure you worked closely with him on some of the projects that you mentioned earlier. So yeah,
exactly.
We developed a little bit of a relationship with him based on that. So again, thank you for all the work that you guys do for us, but we're here this week to discuss the upcoming, I'm going to call it for now the parade, because I know that the name of the parade has gone over a bunch of different iterations. I remember when I was a kid, it was called the Salute to Israel Parade. I know colloquially we call it the Israel Day Parade, which I don't think that's ever been the official name of it. Just after we call it the Puerto Rican Day Parade. There's all these day parades, so we call these. So what are we calling it these days?
Celebrate Israel Parade.
Celebrate Israel Parade.
Come together and celebrate. That's the goal of the day. That's what we call it. The Celebrate Israel Parade.
Phenomenal. And this, of course, is a very interesting year because it's the first time we've had such a parade in 2 years. So I want you to talk about some of the things that you're going to be focusing on this year. I know there's, I don't know if we've gotten the theme yet. I haven't seen it. But what's the theme of this year's parade? And also, what are we doing to talk about what's gone on over the last 2 years?
So the theme of the parade is Kulanu Biyachad. So basically back together again. And I think that's something that really resonates. Two pieces. One, that we're back. We have been absent from the streets because of COVID. And I think the Jewish community has lost because of that. And I think Israel has lost because of that, because, I think coming together through social media, through internet, through Zoom, all very important. Supporting Israel, celebrating Israel through film, through video, through internet, important. But at the end of the day, feet on the ground is feet on the ground. And I think people understand that, people in the Jewish community and people outside the Jewish community. And many people ask me, will the parade be coming back? Will it take place again? And they also ask another question, which I think is very important to other groups, non-Jewish groups that I deal with and talk to. And they say, do Jews still care about Israel? Is there, is it that younger people don't care so much about Israel and all of the things? And I think that's why this year is critically important for the parade. It is essential, not only for us as a Jewish community, but that we, together with other New Yorkers who care about Israel, are seen to come together to march up Fifth Avenue. And it's a privilege that sometimes we take for granted. I grew up in Ireland. It's a very small Jewish community. I spent a lot of time in European Jewish communities. For me, Fifth Avenue, that was the center of the world. That was, never mind Statue of Liberty, that was important. Fifth Avenue, that was something, and that's a very powerful symbol outside of New York, even in New York, but outside of New York. We should not take for granted that a day comes where Jews and non-Jews come together proudly to march up Fifth Avenue and say, we are proud to march, and also to say we're not afraid. And particularly in a post-Colleyville world, in a world where we've seen attacks, we've seen all the horrible danger that Jews have been subjected to here in the United States, something unimaginable a few years ago. It is critically important that we as a community turn out and say, we're not afraid to march, and we're proud to be on Fifth Avenue. And it's something very unique. And I think for people, and particularly outside New York and others, they see that. And I think this year is so important that we are back together. And I think that's the second word I want to emphasize, is together. We've reached out to all parts of the Jewish community. We want people, whether they're Orthodox, conservative, Reform, any background, any kind of commitment, whether left, right, whatever their views are, if they're committed to supporting and celebrating Israel, we want those voices there. The diversity, the beautiful diversity of the New York Jewish community. It's a mosaic. And, I found that when I came here from Ireland, one of the things that I fell in love with from that first day I came here was this amazing diversity of New York and the diversity of the Jewish community. And the parade is a place where we can come together. And there are enough times where our Jewish world is fractured and divided, where we have different views, and that's fine. Everyone has different views, different opinions, and that's what makes us Jews, among other things. But there also has to be a time when we come together, and the parade is one of those moments, and we are at a critical moment, and especially because we've not been able to do that because of COVID, this is the year for people to come. So I ask everyone, be there, come, be with a group to march, come and watch, or both march and watch, come and be there and see what it is for people to come together and be part of that coming together. It's a community event, and there aren't so many. It's very hard, and this is the major event, and there is no event like this in the world. This is by far the biggest event that celebrates Israel in the entire world. And not only I think is important for us as a community, it's important for other New Yorkers, and it's important for Israel. So we have coming to this parade a whole host of Israeli officials and huge interest from Israeli media about this parade, because they also feel that this is a sign that there's support, there's engagement, there's a bridge, there's a connection to the biggest Jewish community outside of Israel. It's very important for Israel to see that people support and care, are engaged. And if we want to have that connection to Israel, it's great to get on a plane and go to Israel. And we hope that everyone can and will as often as they can. And that's a wonderful thing. But you know what? This is a little bit easier and not that much harder. And it's only a few hours. You can be and do a little bit of being in Israel on Fifth Avenue on May 22nd.
And actually, as a parent with young children, it's something to do with the kids for the day. That's not going to cost you a lot of money.
It's not going to cost a lot of money, and it's a lot of excitement. It's a lot of buzz, and it's unique. And New Yorkers should not take it for granted because no other city has this, and no other country or Jewish community has anything like this. It's something really beautiful and unique, and we should not take it for granted. And it's fun. It's fun. It's Absolutely. A way to connect with Israel in a way that's fun. It's not hard.
So you went through a lot of things. I want to talk a little bit about what it takes to put this type of event together. I'm sure this is probably one of your flagship events or flagship things that people know about the JCRC. I want to start with just because we're on the topic of security. So I'm sure you're working with the NYPD whenever any of these big parades happen in New York City. I'm sure the NYPD is in full force, but I want to see is there anything that's different about the Celebrate Israel parade that is maybe different from some of the other parades that happen?
Look, there is incredibly tight security, and anyone who's been to the parade in previous years knows that. I think this year even more so. There will be huge numbers of police, all different parts of the law enforcement community. And bear in mind, it's not only for the people who are there, there are also elected leaders there. We expect the governor, we expect the mayor, we expect other senior officials from Israel. So this is something that tremendous attention goes to, which makes it a little more complicated. There's restrictions on where you can go, but nothing that everyone can't manage. But we're very careful, and a huge investment of time and effort and energy on security, which is obviously so important for us as a community.
Are there any maybe newer type things that we could expect this year from the parade that we didn't necessarily have in previous years? Is anything innovative that we're kind of waiting to break out? Is there something new that we could expect to see?
Well, one thing we're very, very proud, and I haven't talked about it yet, so you're
all right.
You're getting
breaking news here.
Breaking news. We reached out to a number of our partners who we've worked with on other issues in Brooklyn, in some of the churches in Brooklyn, and 3 of the churches are going to, for the first time ever, participate in the parade. Black churches in Brooklyn who we have worked with on community relations issues. And we said to them, would you like to come and participate in the Israel parade? And they were enthusiastic about doing so. We have 3 churches coming. There'll be music, a float with music. There'll be a parishioners coming directly from church services. It was a bit complicated. We said it's on Sunday, and we know that's difficult. One of them is a Seventh-day Adventist church, but the other 2 are churches services on Sunday. They're coming directly from services on Sunday with buses. And I think that's something that's very important and very powerful. I think it's a sign and a message to the wider community that there are people outside our community who support Israel, who are ready to march for Israel. I think it's important also for our own community to see that there are people and friends that we have in different communities in Brooklyn, around the city, who care and support Israel. And I think that's a very important message. So that's something that we're very proud of. We're going to have a float this year of Holocaust survivors. And I think that's incredibly important. And obviously, as Holocaust survivors age, it's harder and harder for them to engage in any kind of event. This year, we decided we should have a Holocaust survivor float that would honor the connection of Holocaust survivors and to Israel. So we will have that float. There will be Holocaust survivors there. And then marching with that float will be a number of agencies that work very closely with Holocaust survivors and help Holocaust survivors. And staff from those agencies will be there. I think that's an important message. So at this parade, you can see the oldest Holocaust survivor and the youngest kids in day schools. And I think, and that's what makes the parade special. This is an intergenerational event. And we wanted to sort of bring that out very clearly and show that. We have a delegation coming with a few buses from Greater Washington. We reached out to a few communities on the East Coast. There's some also from New Jersey, from Connecticut, but from Washington for the first time, from the community of Washington said, yes, we would like to participate. We don't have anything like this. We want to be there. So they're coming. Jewish Federations of North America, representing the entirety of the community, are going to have a float. They're going to be there. There's going to be a special trolley with Jewish war veterans. So again, part of this intergenerational connection between kids from schools and the older part of our community. That's what kind of bringing people together. We'll have music, some big stars. We've got Nissan Black, Soul Farm, and the Moshav Band. So we've got great music.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of dance troops as well.
Any marching bands?
We've got, I believe we've got, I'm just trying to remember how many. We've got a bunch of marching bands. I think we said we've got, I think it's about 23 floats, 13 bands. That's what I'm just looking at.
Oh, phenomenal. 13
bands, 3 dance troops, 23 floats, and 6 billboard trucks as of a few days ago. So we might have a couple more, but that's, it's great. We're going to have almost 200 separate marching groups.
Phenomenal. And how does that break down? Obviously, you just mentioned some of them. How many schools, synagogues are we looking at?
I don't remember the breakdown. A lot of schools, but also synagogues, also organizations, all kinds of groups from across.
Is the JCRC marching?
We have it, yes, of course. We have a float, so we have people come from JCRC. People are sprinkled, obviously, throughout, involved in different organizations, but also we will have a JCRC float, UJA, a big supporter of the parade, very important. They will obviously have a float. They're very engaged in supporting this. Israelis, we have a wonderful Grand Marshal, Harley Lippman, his name is, he's the CEO of Genesis. It's a major tech company, who's the Grand Marshal this year, which is wonderful. And he's been a terrific support. He's worked with us to help Jizz Up support. He's going to be there marching right up near the front. We expect senior political officials coming, governor and mayor and others, and city council and the assembly and Senate. Certainly huge, tremendous interest, especially I think there's a lot of pent-up demand from people who have not been able to participate in March. And we're seeing that really coming out. The Attorney General, we expect with their Controller, DiNapoli, Congress,
the
members of Congress.
New York or the Attorney General of the country?
Attorney General of New York.
Okay.
Of New York. This is our New York. This is our coming together in New York. Though, as I say, it's an international event. We broadcast on Channel 9 on TV. Also, we will live stream it. We usually get a lot of coverage. We believe this year, we believe we'll get an awful lot of coverage. So it's available. We're encouraging people in Israel to watch. So we've reached out to a number of people in Israel to help promote it. We want this to be a bridge between New York and Israel. So it's, and that's what I think this parade symbolizes, is people coming together.
This is a question that's probably too late for this year at this point. But if, let's say, I'm a part of an organization or a school or a synagogue that wants to march, maybe not for this year, maybe for next year, how would I go about doing that?
They can go to the Celebrate Israel Parade website, and registration will be there. There's information there. on the JCRC website, certainly. But if somebody wants to march and isn't, there's probably a group. There are many, many, many groups marching. So I suspect if you ask around, you will certainly be able to jump in this year, and also just be there, be on the sidelines and watching, because I think that's also important. That's also a message, and it's encouraging for marchers when they see people on the sides of the streets there, and you'll see lots of your friends. And it's also a lovely social gathering. One of the things we're doing this year is we've sent to every marching group a location on the avenue where they can gather after the parade. So if somebody marches, they go in their delegation, and then there's a place, 68th Street, 69th Street on the west side, east side. So in a way, we want it to be a place that kind of circles back, and people come back to gather, meet up with their friends, and be there to watch and support and encourage others who are coming.
Phenomenal. I know you mentioned the musical guest that you've had that you're going to be at. Is that the concert afterwards? Is that separate?
No, during the parade.
Okay.
During the parade.
Are you guys affiliated with the concert that happens afterwards?
No, we're not. No, we parade is
the parade is enough.
That is enough.
Okay.
Just bringing together, it's 40,000 marchers. It is a huge, huge, huge endeavor. And by New York, even by the standards of any of the parades of New York, this is probably one of the biggest.
Probably Thanksgiving is probably the biggest.
Yes, not of the Thanksgiving, but of the themed parades, it's certainly a major parade, and it's a way for people to connect, to join, to do it with fun, and just especially it's time for us to be back on the streets. And I think being on the streets is important. Look, during COVID, Israel was on the street. There was viciously anti-Israel protests a couple of times on the streets, and the Jewish community wasn't there because of COVID, because of everything. Now is the time to come back and say, we are back. We're here. We're proud to be here. We're proud to walk up Fifth Avenue and say, we celebrate Israel. That's why this year is so, so important.
So you mentioned the protests. I'm going to ask you this in a very specific way. There are going to be, I'm assuming, some protests that are going to go on during the parade. What would you advise people to do when they see these protests going on? How should we behave towards the protests?
My view is everyone has the right to say anything they want. What's more important is that our voice is loud and louder and strong, and people can say what they want. People can do what they want. People can make noise. It's not a challenge match. It's getting our voice, our megaphone, to say we celebrate Israel, and that's the way we send a message to our city, our country, to Israel, our own communities outside our community. That's how we do it, not by arguing. And there's a time and a place to argue against protest. There's a time and a place to argue. The parade is the time for us to be stronger, louder, and more visible. And that's what the parade's about. It's about us being visible. And sure, if people protest, they protest. You know what? We're not afraid of that. It's more important that we're there, and we're not afraid to be there, and we're not afraid of protest. We're not afraid of anything. We're proud. We're on Fifth Avenue, and no Jew in New York should take that for granted. And that's why you have to be there, and not to say, you know what, next year I'll do it, or it's good that it's happening, but I'm busy. Don't take it for granted. Be there. So important.
Absolutely. One important thing that we haven't mentioned is the date. When is the
okay.
Like, we should make sure people know that that's when it's happening.
May
and what time it starts.
May 22nd. May 22nd.
May 22nd, and the route starts what street and what time?
It runs from you know what, let me just get you the exact streets. I'm going to do that.
That's okay.
By the way, I should tell you, I took a walk yesterday down Fifth Avenue, up Fifth Avenue along the route, and our banners are up. So if you walk down Fifth Avenue, if you happen to be going to up Fifth Avenue before the parade, you will see the banners with the theme "Together Again," Kulanu Biyachad, on all the way up Fifth Avenue, with the time and the date, which is it's May 22nd. It runs from 57th Street to 74th Street. Starts at 11:30 and will run till 4. And it's an incredibly long parade, 11:30 to 4, and that's a very long time, and not everyone's there all the time. And the reason, and I remember when I first started, I said, is this parade 11:30 to 4? Do we really? And I've been in the parade, so I know it. I had my kids in that parade, and I remember the first time. And the reality is, people want to march. They want to march on Fifth Avenue, and there's something really beautiful about that. Some people want to come and watch, and that's great, but a lot of people, they want to show their support by actually marching, which is why we have an incredibly long parade. But what that means is, it means that people want to be there, and they want one, and that's really important. So 11:30 to 4, May 22nd, Sunday, between 57th and 74th Street.
I'm sure there's also people that march in multiple groups. They finish with one group, they walk back all the way down, they start it up again, change the t-shirt.
Yeah, that's fine too. That's fine too.
Where can people learn more about the parade? I know you mentioned the website, but also about the JCRC. Where can people learn more?
So on the JCRC website, if you just Google JCRC of New York, you'll see the JCRCNY.org is the website for JCRC. And for the Celebrate Israel Parade, if you want specifically information on the parade, it's celebrateisraelny.org. And you can get information about the parade there. So, or you can go to our website as well.
And are you guys on social media?
Yes. So come follow JCRC on JCRC of New York on social media, and particularly about the parade. There's a lot of stuff about the parade going out now, updates. There'll be others, guests, people who show up there. Will be people who yet to be announced. Some other guests we're hoping will come. We're not 100% sure. We'll be announcing those as well. So follow us on Twitter. Join us on social media, Facebook. We're on all the major platforms.
And of course, we'll link to all of the JCRC's social media on our social medias. I wasn't planning on asking this, but because I almost never get the chance to talk to an Irish Jew, this year Purim fell out on St. Patrick's Day. What was that like for you?
Yeah, a double celebration. Double celebration. A few people asked me about that.
I'm sure they did. Because in New York, we don't know too many Irish Jews.
Lots of similarities. Yeah, it was really, really lovely. There was an organization, I remember some years ago, that was founded by some Irish Jews. There were a few Irish Jews who were here, or people who were Jews but who had a special affinity for Ireland, which thrived under the unique name. It was called the League of the Loyal Yiddish Sons of Aaron. that was the organization, the League of the Loyal Yiddish Sons of Aaron, and its logo was a Magen David with shamrocks growing around in and out of the Magen David.
Was the color blue or was the color green?
You know what? It was 25 years ago. I think everything was black and white. But I guess in today's world it would be blue and green. So one of these days, my dream is to revive the League of the Loyal Yiddish Sons of Aaron, and invite anyone who feels an affiliation with Ireland. You don't have to be a son or a child of Aaron, but there's a lot of parallels and a lot of history, and it was a wonderful Jewish community, and a wonderful opportunity to grow up in Ireland, and to be in New York is the two great communities, and I'm very pleased to be able to be part of both of them.
Phenomenal. Gideon Taylor, thank you so much for joining me. This was a pleasure. And I hope to see you at the parade. I'll try to pick you out of the crowd when I see you walking
Fifth Avenue. I'll be up and down. You'll see me. I look forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely. Oh, one last thing. Is Stewie Kaplan doing the announcing this year?
You know what? I don't know.
I know he was doing it for years. He did it. He has people walking by. I'm curious if he's continuing, because
of all the details I've dealt with, that is not one that I have checked, but I will check.
I'm just curious about that. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great night. My thanks to Gideon Taylor for joining me this week. And to all those planning on attending this year's event, have a wonderful time and please be safe. I will be there as well. Feel free to come over and say hello if you see me. To everyone else, Kol Tov.
The Jewish Living Podcast is produced by Sreli Pikus. Our theme song is The Band by A.B. Rottenberg. Follow us on Facebook at The Jewish Living Podcast and on Twitter and Instagram at Jewish_living. You can also email the show at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. The Jewish Living Podcast is recorded in conjunction with the Queen's Jewish Link.